What is your presentation in?
It's Chrome. Yep. Kill that. Yep, there you go. Yep.
Full screen?
Yeah, that's fine.
There you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
No problem. Have a good session.
Cool. Thanks, man. Cool. Guys. Jennifer, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. Come on in. So it's 2 o'clock. I guess we'll get started and go through quite a few slides. So hopefully we'll get through them in time. So schema.org, Drupal, and the future of SEO. So has anybody used Schema or done anything with that? Cool. A couple of you guys. Awesome. So I'm Nick Grace, front-end developer with JBS International. I'm Nick Grace just about everywhere. Also with General Assembly, I'm involved in their front-end web developer courses. So if you want to learn front-end web development, come talk to me. I can get you connected.
I'm Mike Nescott, Web Operations Manager at JBS International. Work along with Nick for many years, and I'm M. Nescott just about everywhere.
So JBS International is a 400-person company. We're a federal contractor. We specialize in health and human services and DOJ, HHS, NIH clients. We are not necessarily a digital agency, but we're part of the digital in-house team, web development team. We've been working in Drupal since approximately 2009, ever since the transition between Drupal 5 and Drupal 6. And we have been really trying to push sort of a full service, not only just design, but also working with our clients on content strategy, on SEO, metadata, all of that good stuff. Because ultimately, it's about getting good information out to the public. And we're here to talk about schema, and that's one really good way. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of SEO, where we were and how we got here. We'll talk a little bit about rich snippets, Google's knowledge graph, the schema.org module in particular for Drupal, and then the future of schemas, the DOM, and SEO. And through this journey, we'll also talk a little bit about content syndication and just sort of, how you can use it for your own sites and take advantage of it.
Right. Other uses of HTML and markup beyond schema.org.
So the history of SEO, where we were, where we've come from, indeed. Anyone here was 90s developer? Yeah, this looks familiar to all of us. Although Yahoo did not look like that in 93. They weren't around. So yeah, as Mosaic 1.0, the first graphical browser, changed everything. Then of course, Mosaic became Netscape, and that was history. But for us, what's important is Yahoo 94, and they did manual search engine submission. You wanted to get your website into the directory, you had to manually submit it. You had to contact them, send your information, and they had staffers. I think they were called producers in those days. Producers who sat there, they were expert in local restaurants or in whatever the topic was. So it was human curated. In 95, you had IE1. That kicked off the whole browser wars. Later that year, Alta Vista, which went through, it crawled through pages and initiated what was then called on-page SEO. So it actually looked at the content on your pages and tried to, or threw into a searchable database. In 98, of course, Google launched. I don't think it was until probably the early 2000s that even I started to use Google. It was just like Alta Vista, it was just a keyword search. Then they started to show that they were different with PageRank. Even this PageRank, still here to this day, up here inside of the Chrome, gives you sort of a numerical value of that page's ranking authority, I guess, or their page rank. I guess Page is named not on a web page, but after Larry Page. In 2003, they launched Google AdSense, which pretty much destroyed the web in the 2000s, in the mid to late 2000s, because it monetized bad content and monetized content farms and things like that. And people got paid. I actually know somebody who was making easily 10 grand a month by putting up these keyword stuffed websites and things like that. You had all these sites that were made for AdSense. They scraped content, and the only real content, of course, is down here, where the green circle is. It's the only original content on it. You get sucked in by doing a search, and these content scraped from elsewhere. It's a lot of junk. The first major update to Google's algorithm occurred in 2003 with the Florida update, which was the death to what they called keyword stuffing. And that was stuffing just words in there to trick Google to think, oh, well, there's a density of the phrase fire pit table. That's what this page must be about. So people were gaming the system. So the Florida update put a stop to that. In 2005, there were 2 more updates to the Google algorithm that added the trustability of inbound links to your site. So if your site was linked from some of these nasty content farms, your ranking would go down. You were actually being affected by sites linking to yours. So if you were linked to from .gov or .edu sites, which have a higher relevance and higher authority, then your authority and ranking would be increased. In 2007, they introduced what they call universal search. That was it by adding maps and images. They started to make the search page, the search results page, a much more rich and content-rich experience. Thumbnails and things like that. So they've started to embed more and more content into the searches. In 2011, they pretty much killed content farms with the Panda algorithm. It's an interesting screenshot from Google Analytics of a site that got hit with one of the Panda updates. It apparently eviscerated most of these ugly sites. Sites like about.com. You remember you searched a couple of years ago, the only results would be about.com. You could never get off the darn thing. I mean, that's really important. I would search the internet just to find out how to name a kitten or a puppy. It's really rich content. It's exactly what people are looking for. But hey, cats, Somebody once said to me, Nick, why do you always put cats in your presentations? So the most important for this presentation was in May 2012 the announcement that they had incorporated into their search algorithm the knowledge graph. And that, plus some of these other things then the Hummingbird algorithm have really changed in a major way how Google is crawling through and contextualizing and it's our sites and it's changed the whole search engine experience for users. Let me see if I can. So this is. It never works for me when I try to do this. When I try to force it, but this is an example of what they call conversational search. Who is the President of the United States? It's supposed to read it. Let's see if this works. When was he born?
It works really well on Androids.
So who is the President of the United States? That works. Where was he born? So you can actually go through and, like, where was he born? In Honolulu. And then, how is the weather there? The weather is 83 degrees. It understands it understands there, it understands that the context of your search. We're just steps away from HAL, the crazy computer, because it can start a dialogue with us practically. What's that? Okay, Dave. So they've really added in, they've incorporated the knowledge graph, which we'll discuss in more detail very shortly, and they've added context, semantics, and conversational search to their search database. But this, of course, you can't have if all the content is just content farms, or there's things that we have to do on our end. It's just a quick sort of timeline of some of the important Google updates. So one of the things that they've been incorporating, which we can leverage to take advantage of this, are rich snippets. So there are four, right? There are really four syntaxes for rich snippets. These are the sort of the three solid standbys, and there's one that's
a newer JSON LD.
Yeah, that Mike will be talking about microdata, microformats, and RDFA. So here's an example of some biographical information that's been for the microdata. Essentially, it's contextualizing this. It's contextualizing the content. So these are no longer strings. They have more context for what these are. There's an item scope with an item type, which tells the crawler where this is from, or what vocabulary is going to be used to contextualize this data, and then it provides a number of terms like name, nickname, title, and affiliation to this clip. And here's the same information as a micro format, in this case an H card, which interestingly is noted as a div class as a V card. But again, it's providing some contextual information it's adding these classes to the data that tells Google what that is. Google, Bing, and its other search engines. And then same information again as RDFA, as an RDFA rich snippet. This information, if you get into your pages, Google can better understand what it is that the page is about. The one that is, or the vocabulary, there are a number of different vocabularies that are used, and schema.org is really the primary one. It contains thousands of terms of what they call entities, and these entities are then broken down into things. And schema maps to, or its terms are mapped to different types of vocabularies that are used by a number of different search engines. And it's becoming really a universal standard for linked data. And by following it, you can ensure that your content adheres to this emerging best practice for linked data. Schema.org was started as a collaboration by Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo. I think now Yandex, the Russian search engine, is now getting involved in this collaboration to create best practices, basically. There's 570 million objects and some 18 billion facts, at least that was according to 2012, in the schema.org vocabulary. And its use and adoption in the past year has just exploded. The most current number that I've seen is it's used by nearly 2 million websites. It's just, this is in 1 year, sort of the adoption of it, of microdata in particular. So Google itself is using schema.org to help power the rich snippets that it's using inside of its search engine results, its SERP, its results pages, search engine's results pages. Not every term in the schema.org vocabulary has been adopted by Google. Some of the major ones have, like people, places, events, reviews, products, and recipes. Those are out of the box now in Google. Some of them that are on the horizon to be adopted include job listings, and Mike will discuss in more detail medical trials. Something of course very important for the government and NIH in particular. So the Google schema.org FAQ says that schema.org and utilization of it does not impact, they state outright that it does not impact SEO, but this is, I don't think this is accurate. And I think the conventional thinking is that it's not accurate. Here's an example of the HTML, the markup, and the display of a rich snippet using schema.org markup in Google. So here's Dries. If you type in Dries Boytart, you'll get one of those results. And most interestingly, it actually pulls out his title and his affiliation. It has that under the URL or the path there. Here's an example of an event. Whoa, you all right? It's all right. Any fans of Sing Kane? Great band. Look them up. Awesome band. They're on tour this fall. And Songkick, the website Songkick uses microdata. And here's an example of one of Sing Kane's concerts that's marked that uses the schema markup, and it's listing in Google. So together with the knowledge graph, Google has really taken their search engine results pages to a whole other level, and they're still moving forward with this. They're using the knowledge graph to move away from the keywords, to move away from strings, and they're looking for the real-world relationships. They're looking to make the search engine be about things. And when you're searching, your search starting and ending with things. So rich snippets, knowledge graph, all together, this is what the people search looks like in Google now. I know everyone has seen these, but here's places. If you're searching the Washington Monument, it gives you just a wealth of information. They're almost becoming, I think, Greece came very close to calling this sort of the big box store of the internet, and it is. I don't need to go to another website to see that there are, it's almost a 5-star review to go to the Washington Monument. Yeah, it's what I want to do on a nice sweltering August afternoon in D.C. But it gets a 4.4-star review. But you get the photos, you get a map of it. I could click the map and it gives me directions. You know, here's recipes. Gives me all the nutritional data. Plus, for SEO purposes, the rich snippets, you can get a thumbnail shown in the search engine result page, which of course will attract a higher number of clicks to, or at least your listing will stand out more than, say, Wikipedia, which interestingly, Wikipedia does not use schema.org. But yet it's part of the knowledge graph, so it still has a high ranking. Here are products, once again, with reviews, and you don't even need to go to the e-commerce site. It's right there. With a one click, you can go right to the page and buy this thing. Here's music, so you can purchase the songs right there off of the site, or even listen to snippets from this artist. Businesses. Anyone from JBS International? Yeah. So here's JBS, and you know the knowledge graph is putting the address and other information there, and then events. So type in events in DC, and they have this ribbon there on the top, which gives you what's happening this weekend, what's coming up. And then they've tied it in, of course, also with any of the anything that uses microdata that I may have emailed or that's part of my Google user account. So August.
What was the search you did to get that?
Events in DC. That was it. So August 11th, the Drupal user meetup group at Stetson's. It's right here. Dave would have been very happy. And very interestingly, the search engine blogs have been buzzing about what they're calling the timeline. This apparently is in a very, I guess it's kind of in a Drupal 8 beta state. It's not yet in beta. It's sort of like in this weird, they probably have 2.5 blockers left, like D8 does. But we'll soon be able to see a timeline, actually see events. Here's the Gallipoli fight. Here's, if you search World War, this is, I guess, in where they're beta testing this. Someone did a test on, did a search on World War, and they get this, all the little battles that make it up. And the link, incidentally, if you want to see more about the timeline, is right there. So there is a module for Drupal, schema.org module. We're not going to go so much into the implementation of the module, but it's quite easy. You install it, go to your content types, and associate fields with schema.org terms, and it will control it'll add the schema.org markup to the Drupal HTML markup. We've had some issues with the title tag in particular.
Right, but generally what happens is you map your Drupal fields to schema.org fields. And we've found there are some issues with title mapping to schema.org fields, and what we've had to do in some cases is implement alternate fields in Drupal that match up to those, and then we've gotten it to work. It's a work in progress, as is schema.
And the D8, the core D8 team, doing an amazing job. They're actually going to be implementing schema into Drupal 8, so you won't have to have an additional module for that.
So it's important to know, actually, that schema.org and the whole story of the rise of Google is also part of a story about the rise and fall of HTML, you might say. And then its rebirth and the expansion of the capabilities of HTML and other markup languages to give us a rich semantic exploratory experience on the web. This is the HTML from the first website developed by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN. I was privileged enough to work in web development from the beginning, when continuous delivery and full stack development was using a text editor on index.html in production. Although the tools were relatively primitive and the markup was relatively simple, I remember the sheer awesomeness of being able to click on a link in a text document and being transported across the globe to a document related to that. It seemed like magic. And part of the magic was the simplicity tied in with the technical advances we were making. Then we sort of lost our way, and the markup became an afterthought. We didn't want to deal with the details, with the muck of HTML. And so just a few years later, this is the same content exported from Save as HTML from Microsoft Word. Arguably a greater gift to web development than IE6. Actually, it's 1/25th of the HTML from the first document. But there's been a rebirth in simplicity as far as markup goes. There's a whole initiative in Drupal 8 to clean things up. This is the core component of Twig as it stands in Drupal 8. And there's a whole, as many of us are aware, there's a whole movement to allow us to do what is known as headless or decoupled Drupal, where we can build the markup from the ground up, make it as simple or as complex and semantically rich as we're able to. Nick mentioned earlier how Google does not acknowledge using schema.org in determining the ranking of your search results compared to others, but there has been some research done that shows those who've used schema.org on the average advance their search positions by 4. And this is a report that's done by one of the leading search SEO experts in the US. Quite a colorful title there. But basically their conclusion is that simply using schema.org increases the findability of your content on the web. As Nick also mentioned, rich snippets at least have support for a relatively limited range of the different types of content that is modeled in schema.org. But we can see, if we look at the schema.org work that's been done in the medical and health field, the potential in terms of improving our ability to find content when a lot of this stuff is fully implemented. We do a lot of work with clinical trials, as Nick was saying, at JBS, working with agencies such as the National Institute on Aging on creating clinical trial databases that pull in information on trials from the web services maintained by the National Library of Medicine, clinicaltrials.gov, and then we add custom data on top of that general clinical trial information, including fields that are of specific relevance to patients and families and medical folks dealing with Alzheimer's disease. There are certain particular concerns with certain diseases. For example, in Alzheimer's disease, there's a field related to disease stage that's critical in finding trials for people with Alzheimer's disease, but is not included in the general clinical.gov schema. So we're able to add that, and as you can see, clinicalschema.org has a very rich schema for mapping different medical entities. There's an inheritance which makes a medical trial inherit the fields and capabilities of a medical study, and before that a medical entity. It is a medical trial is then related in a parent and child fashion to different medical coding structures, to different types of literature databases, and so you can imagine, and these things are related often in a bidirectional fashion. So you can imagine the variety of ways in which this will eventually enable us to find and explore data based on our individual needs. And as we more and more realize the Internet of Things, you can imagine the capabilities of medical devices and intelligent medical bots for also navigating this type of taxonomy. Now here is one of the clinical trials that is represented in the schema using the schema.org vocabulary there. As Nick mentioned, although it's not used in rich snippets, we've already started to utilize the schema for that purpose. I would also add that Nick discussed the knowledge graph, and Google, in fact, within the knowledge graph, has a whole medical and health knowledge graph embedded in that. They pull in data from resources such as NLM and FDA to construct that. So even now, you can see the potential of tying these two systems together. And again, we can only imagine 5 or 10 years from now, where as the Google knowledge graph gains capabilities in these specialty areas, as Drupal gains capabilities in adopting schema.org, how that will increase the intelligence of our searches. There are other efforts to more effectively use markup besides schema.org that we can also take advantage of as we improve these semantic capabilities of our HTML. There's a big effort in HHS on to syndicate content so that it becomes easier for not only different government agencies but local and state governments and private organizations to embed content from other resources in their own websites and applications. So they don't have to reinvent content, and so they can pull in on a continuous basis the most up-to-date resources from authoritative knowledge bases.
So we specifically at JBS have worked with the folks at HHS who are developing this system and the related API to pull in content from our client, the National Institute on Aging's website. And you can see that, let's take a look at this one here. What happens is, we'll see in a moment, is that you do some simple additions to the HTML properties that's rendered through Drupal, and then it pulls in the core content and graphics data in a standards-based way, so it can easily be dropped into the context of another website in a very intelligent fashion. Now, yes, we're going to take a look at that right now, in fact. So there's a whole API that HHS is developing around this, including the ability to add in the metadata specific tags about a variety of different types of entities. And this API will also allow you not only to intelligently syndicate your own content, but also to pull in content based on tags and other types of relationships from other resources out there, so that it becomes not only a syndication, but a content sharing mechanism. And there's a Drupal module that's actually being developed. It's I understand is soon to be released, at least in beta version, that will allow you to effectively use the API through the administrative interface of Drupal. Because this API is still in the early stages of development, what you basically can do now is, in a very simple way, just assign certain blocks of your content to be syndicated simply by assigning a class to a div that it will block out from beginning to end the portions of that page that you wish to syndicate. So it's as simple as that right now. This is another example of syndication and the HHS interface. Now, one of the interesting things to consider is how, if we're going to have schema.org and perhaps other sources using our markup to syndicate and improve the searchability of data, is how we might use all these things together. We saw that the output from schema.org in terms of a medical entity was somewhat bloated because of the complex relationships there. What if we have 3 or 4 different systems that we want to syndicate content for, or improve the searchability of our data to benefit from the efforts there? And some of us are aware that there's a general trend in web services to move away from XML tagging formats such as HTML to leaner, more compact formats like JSON. And in fact, both Google and schema.org are working on including JSON LD in their support for rich snippets and microdata.
And you can also assign actions.
That's right. So this is a an example of that same data we looked at before encoded in JSON. There are other benefits besides JSON being more compact in using that, and one of that is you can include it in the metadata. You don't have to include it in the actual display markup of the page. There may be other elements that there may be elements that you want to use for syndication that you don't necessarily want to display on the page. This is one issue we've run into with some of our uses of schema.org. The other thing is that they've made it so it's a little bit more extensible than the HTML model for schema.org. So allowing you more easily other sources to build upon the JSON representations of each other. So you might only, so it's probably going to be much easier to use multiple syndication or search utilities at the same time. Another initiative and new technology that is focused on improving the semantic capabilities of content and in making it easier to find is something known as web components. And this is takes advantage. This is of a emerging WC3 standard, including such attributes as custom elements, which are basically just rolling your own HTML tags. So in terms of a clinical trial, you'd actually have a tag clinical trial that was enclosing the information. It takes advantage of something known as the shadow DOM, which is the capability of browsers basically to understand these custom tags. And it takes advantage of HTML imports, which is the capability of pulling one HTML document or template into another one. Now, this is an emerging standard. Well, this is so that this is the browsers do not currently support this. But a number of companies, including Google, have developed polyfills that allow you basically to do web components right now. One of the more popular ones, which received a lot of attention at the recent Google I/O, is known as Polymer. And Polymer allows you basically, as you can see here, to very interestingly sort of mix HTML and JSON to get some of the same effects that we saw previously. So you can see, for example, you could have a tag associated specifically with medical trial, and then it allows you to expose your properties as attributes. So a lot of the rest of the information we saw before can be represented as an attribute. Furthermore, it allows you to represent your attributes in JSON format. So you can mix HTML and JSON in a very interesting and efficient way. Sort of an alternative to the web component model is a library that Facebook released last year that allows you to customize the DOM in a very dynamic fashion. Whereas with web components, you construct templates. With the Facebook model, the DOM is actually rebuilt completely on every request in a very efficient fashion using something known as the virtual DOM and their JavaScript library. So this actually allows you to run the library on Node.js and render the DOM completely on the server. And we'll include the links to all these resources in the slides. So, following up on my earlier question, I guess one consideration is how does this all tie together? How do you use web components? Do you use schema.org? Because they both supposedly increase your SEO. And how do you use these things effectively together so you don't have to rework stuff? And the answer is I don't know at this point. I don't think anyone does. Maybe by next year, we or someone else can present a session here and we'll have a better idea. But it's certainly, as we can see, that there's a very exciting future in terms of the ability to use markup more effectively, be it HTML or JSON, and the future of the semantic web is bright indeed.
Any questions? Yes?
Is the knowledge graph effectively an ontology?
It is, so, sorry about ontology, it's a vocabulary.
It includes, right, that
Yeah.
is, as I was saying, it does pull in ontologies from NLM, for example, in terms of medical. But it's more than that. I think it's building upon the ontology together with all the other knowledge that Drupal has in terms of the popularity of data, in terms of, as Nick was saying, the semantic relationships in that, and it's I think takes ontology part of it and then uses it in a dynamic, intelligent fashion in the context of other things.
Yes?
The knowledge graph box in Google search, the description looks like it usually comes from Wikipedia. Is it possible to supply your own description, or is it always come from Wikipedia?
So sources are Wikipedia, Freebase, and as well as I think the CIA
That's right.
Almanac and whatnot. You can influence it through the schema.org,
Yes.
but primarily, and also I think if for a business, leveraging Google Plus as a tool to influence that. But I think that the default for a lot of the information does come from Wikipedia.
Yeah. I would add, though, interestingly enough, that schema.org allows you to add your own schemas on top of that if you wish. So, and so we can see with the ability to customize the DOM, and there's also a support for schema.org and Apache Solr, which is a leading, internal search option. You could use that for your own purpose very effectively, if not in a way that would necessarily influence external search.
Yes?
So, schema.org, why are they the leading ones, and are there competitors, and how are they competing? It seems like this is kind of a standard setting, and usually when that happens, someone disagrees with that.
So
It has emerged just as a sort of a community effort, I think, that
and the three
people rallied around.
the
Right.
biggest search engines have put their weight behind it. And I think one of the really cool things that they've done too is they've kept it open source. So there's a tool I believe called Kaylee, in which you can create your own knowledge graph and create your own graphs and visualizations based on these relationships that you tag and that you create.
Yeah.
So
But there's
they're keeping it open
right,
source.
That's right. And there's been other efforts to do this type of thing over the years, but this just sort of seemed to gain traction at the right time.
Yeah.
What kind of SEO that do you usually get from implementing schema?
So schema in general, as Mike showed, it's as high as 4 rankings.
Right, as you saw, and that's not necessarily a completely scientific valid study. None of these, studies on SEO are. But just look, as we were saying, just general benefit from, findability. You can make so.
really is to everyone's advantage to make it easier for Google to apply rich snippets to your data in searches.
Right, and
So
as
adding
Nick,
thumbnails
right,
and-
as Nick showed with the rich snippets, and as we have a wider array of rich snippets, amidst all the results of all the search results, if you can gain some insight at that top level and more intelligent insight, you can imagine you're much more likely, given people's limited time, to select the ones that have the rich snippets.
Great, well, thanks very much for coming out. Thank you. Can we turn that off? Let's see. Presenting next. Let's see. How do we turn this off? Ah, it's this one.
Yeah.
Stop broadcast.